His Majesty's Deputy British High Commissioner, Mr. Alan Gemmell, Vice Admiral Rao, Commodore Koshy, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege on behalf of the Solanki family, the many other families, the Patels, the Janis, and others around the world who are connected to the Tilawa tragedy, including the SS Tilawa Foundation in South Africa, to welcome you all, and also our friends on YouTube and on Zoom who will be enjoying this program now and also a recording later on. This is the first commemoration of this tragedy, and how fitting it is that 80 years later we can start the process of it becoming a unforgotten tragedy, and we hope that our efforts will start this process of closure and healing. To really set this occasion off to the right start and tone, why don't we watch an introductory video and get a feel for what many of our friends and family had to face 80 years ago. Tilawa 1942, it's actually the name of a ship that was built by the British Steam Navigation Company. It was actually named after a Burmese port, and it was in use for about 18 years. Its route was from Mumbai to South Africa via the Seychelles, Mombasa and Maputo. It ended in Durban, and passengers were mainly Indian nationals looking to offer their trade expertise and look at new business opportunities. On November 20th, 1942, the ship left Mumbai for South Africa. There were 222 crew members, 732 passengers, over 6,000 tons of cargo, which included 60 tons of silver bullion.
I heard a terrible explosion. The ship flares were going up, the siren was going up. Everybody's trying to escape from the ship.
About 900 miles northeast of the Seychelles, there was an attack on the ship by the Japanese Imperial Army. It was the I-29 submarine. It twice torpedoed Tilawa, and after the first torpedo attack, the first officer transmitted SOS message.
I had a terrible shock because I was only a teenager at the time, 17-year-old. It was but another 15 or 20 minutes, I think. I heard another explosion. That must be the second torpedo, and then the lights of Tilawa went off.
They were in the water. Mm-hmm. My late father, for example, did not make it to any of the boats. He was on a plank, on a raft. in the middle of the ocean for 2 nights and 2 days. Now that's a real miracle, you know, as such.
My name is Arvindbhai Jani. I am the last survivor of the ship named Tilawa. She was in the boat and suddenly she saw the water coming in because it bombarded, there was a big hole in the ship, so water was coming in. So immediately she took me, she tied me up here at the back. And immediately went up and asked for the help.
I think this story needs to be seen and heard, you know, not just for my dad, but for the people that didn't make it, you know. And there's going to be other families out there like ours whose, you know, whose families perished and they don't really know about the story or don't know anything about it.
There's a lot of unanswered questions.
Trying to understand why would a Japanese commander of a submarine first cripple the ship, wait 1 hour later, and then eventually deliver the coup de grace, which eventually sank her. And so that 1 hour is of crucial interest to everybody because that will reveal the mystery why she was eventually sunk. So we know there was silver bullion on board. There's speculation there was gold bullion on board. And we're not sure if the Japanese were after the cargo because obviously they needed to fuel their war effort. I've always made this point that had there been a war tragedy in the West, they would have made movies about it. It would blockbuster.
That's quite a moving video, isn't it? And it doesn't get boring watching that. How did we get to this point? You know, this was a tragedy for our family we had no idea existed. And it was actually back in 2007 when I was 20 years old. My father, at the age of 44, was talking to my grandfather back in Leicester and saw this picture of a gentleman. You see the one in the middle, that's my grandfather on the left, Nichhabhai Solanki. He saw this picture in the middle and asked my grandfather, "Who is that?" And my grandfather says, "That's my dad." And my father says, "No, that can't be true because this couple on my left, they're my grandparents." And so my grandfather goes on to explain what had happened. In the province of Gujarat, there are two villages, Kansar and Kacholi. And so we have two fleshly sisters from Kansar marrying two fleshly brothers from Kacholi on the same day. It was quite common back many decades ago. And so what had happened was when Nichhabhai Chibabhai Solanki perished in the Tilawa tragedy, his brother, his oldest brother, Vallabhbhai Chibabhai Solanki, would actually raise my grandfather as his own son. What a beautiful human gesture that was, to give him a new identity, a new start, to take him to East Africa and to give him as best as possible all of the love that he hoped his younger brother could have done if he was still alive. But just think for a moment what that meant for us. It meant two things. First, if my real great-grandfather did not leave at least one child behind before the Tilawa tragedy, I wouldn't be here talking to you today, my father and his siblings. So that for us was a moment of realization, the miracle of life. And the second realization was that for my grandfather, he was given a new opportunity. And that is something that we never wanted to take for granted. But for us now, we had a bit of a family crisis. Which lineage would we continue? Which would we protect? Because remember that this man on the right, he had an identity, he had a life, he had a son, he had a marriage, he had a wife, he had so much going for him. And you know, please try to realize that this was a very dangerous period to be traveling in the first place. It was 3 years before the end of the Second World War, 5 years before the end of British rule here in India. And so coming from an untouchable, low-caste society of primitive, modest means and aspiring for greatness and trying to get every penny together to make a new journey and to try and give your family a better future. This is really where it started for us. And so in 2007, when my father learned this story, it became an inspiration for me too. And he started searching online, what was the name of this ship? What was the event? When did it happen? Why did it happen? And here we are. Online, thanks to the internet, we have 5 pictures of the SS Tilawa. And it was then in 2007, the very same year, that my father found that there were 3 gentlemen in South Africa who had a connection to Tilawa. They had set up the SS Tilawa Foundation. And what is amazing about these 3 individuals, they had taken the research as far as they could, but they found the Transvaal Congress Passenger Manifest. Isn't that something? And they were also able to connect with a gentleman who was part of the HMS Birmingham rescue operation, who actually had a photograph taken from the plane Swordfish when they first saw these survivors who were holding on for dear life for 2 days in the middle of the Indian Ocean with shark attacks and barracudas surrounding them. So how do you think we felt as a family? And many here and online, I keep receiving messages of people copying and pasting a screenshot of this yellow piece of paper and identifying someone from their family who was on Tilawa. And there we are, Nichhabhai Chibabhai Solanki. They even got the spelling right. And that was quite something for us to see. And it was a beginning of a special moment for my father and I too, because we were trying to relive what was that journey like to get onto the flying Rani train from Navsari down into Bombay. 3 individuals, Nichhabhai Chibabhai Solanki, his first cousin Devjibai Bagabai Solanki from Kocholi, who survived, by the way. And then Mr. Chunilal Nosaria, you heard his voice earlier in the video, and he was a survivor too. So imagine these young men in the prime of their life, in their early 20s, making their way to Bombay. They arrive perhaps for the first time to the Ballard Estate train station, which of course no longer exists. They go to the Mackenzie impressive office there. Imagine going in and trying to buy your tickets. And then they would set sail on November 20th of 1942, and they would start this, what was meant to be an exciting journey in some ways too. But you know, in our research we realized something, that it was common practice to go through drills in case something had happened. So this wasn't totally a surprise for them that there could be enemy conflict. And I had realized a year prior, in 1941, that Tilawa had an escort, actually. HMS Cornwall had the privilege of that. And just a couple of days before the Tilawa tragedy, HMS Birmingham and SS Carthage were already on their way to East Africa, but they too would normally participate in the patrolling of waters, escorting, protecting cargo, looking out for German U-boats or Japanese submarines. And it just so happened in bad timing that Tilawa wasn't able to benefit from some of those provisions on November 20th of 1942. So then, of course, as you saw in the video earlier, which the the Japanese have done a great job of recording some of their activities. And so some of the footage that you saw was some of their activities in the middle of the Indian Ocean in 1942. That was real. And this was the crew on the left that were part of that operation. And I know many of you here are avid historians of Indian history. Perhaps you noticed the gentleman on the front row, second from the left. That's actually Subhash Chandra Bose, believe it or not. Yes. And you know, this picture was taken 5 months after the Tilawa tragedy. 5 months. So Tilawa lost its ship in November 1942. And then, according to the history books, April 1943, Subhash Chandra Bose needed some assistance. He was trying to get from the Indian Ocean to Japan, and he met up with this crew, and this crew gave him safe passage to Japan. But it's just an interesting connection that this was the same crew that had attacked the SS Tilawa. Of course, we're very grateful that SS Carthage and HMS Birmingham were part of the rescue operation. 678 souls were brought back to Bombay, and we appreciate their efforts too. And look at this. These are the only 2 photographs that we have of the event. Can you imagine trying to get into one of those boats, lifeboats? There were only 9. And perhaps there's a bit of pushing and shoving and conflict, and perhaps someone pushes you out, or maybe you were hanging on, but then you gave up because you couldn't hack it anymore, couldn't handle the stress. But then how grateful the people on the right, if you look closely on our website, tilawa1942.com, some of them are smiling. They were just so happy to be given that second chance in life. I'm sure you would feel the same. So, in 2012, now we've known of this tragedy for 5 years. This was the final time that I would see my grandfather in Leicester. And he made a request to me which I didn't really take seriously, but I appreciated. And he wasn't losing his mental faculties, but he asked, please find the ship. Please find the location of my father's body. And he kept going on and on and on, and all I could do is comfort and be polite and smile. But that was his request. In the very same year that he made that request, a famous racing driver from England, Ross Hyatt, set up an exploration company called Argentum. And he had planned to find the silver and to start the process of trying to see where this ship was. And it was in 2017, after 6 months or so, that they were able to go over 2 miles deep into the Indian Ocean. They found the wreck site. They were able to salvage the silver. They brought it back to Southampton at the receiver of wreck, which then actually triggered a very interesting, unprecedented maritime law conflict between the Republic of South Africa and Argentum. And the question that came up was if the South Africans should pay for the labor, for the efforts of actually finding the silver bars. Could they claim state immunity? And what the justices concluded on both occasions is that the silver was used for commercial interests. It was on a merchant ship, and everybody acknowledges that the silver does belong to the government of South Africa, but they have to pay for the labor for someone to go and get it. And that Court of Appeals decision just came out in October. But you see, for us, we were excited about the discovery of the ship because it was like a resurrection of the subject. There was only so much we could do up until Mr. Hyatt and Argentum made the effort to go and get the silver. And obviously, good for him. We're happy that he won his little case there. But remember, my grandfather's desire was find the location of the ship. And we hope that now we can get some photographs and videos of the ship and perhaps gain further insights as to what happened. It was during the court case that I thought, why don't we set up a website, Tilawa1942.com. You know, we live in a world where in order to get attention, we need to have an online presence. And I thought it would be fitting that we have a logo that represents the silver, it represents the color of the deep dark blue sea, and that since my great-grandfather actually lost his life, why don't we make him the face representing the other 279 souls? Why can he not become part of the symbol of this forgotten tragedy? And so we've made an effort to have an online presence, and just in this year alone, we've had many articles go out in South Africa, in India, in the United Kingdom, and we appreciate what the press have done on our behalf to share this story with all of you wonderful people. I personally, I know Mrs. Yuvali made comments on this already, but you know, as a young man interested in a variety of projects, you're always wondering who's going to give you a shot in life, who's going to open a door, who can you talk to, who's going to give you a chance. And these fine individuals are a sterling example to all of us, because it, you know, I'm only 35 now, but it shows that when the older generation actually invest time and effort in the younger generation, we're actually able to preserve history and pass on that heritage. And this was of their own free will, pro bono, out of the generosity of their hearts. And so I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Maritime Mumbai Museum Society for saying, yes, we will help you put this commemoration together. How do you feel about that? You know, at first we thought maybe we'll do the commemoration in our village, or perhaps at a museum in London, England. But as things developed, it just became appropriate that this is where we have the commemoration. So in our efforts, what has happened since? Well, up until today, if I give you my cell phone and you look in my WhatsApp, you'll see we've received pictures and stories. 25 families have now reached out and said that my father, my mother was either on the ship or we lost family members. Up until midnight 2 days ago, we thought that our dear friend Mr. Arvindbhai Jani was the only known survivor. And I got a phone call just before I was going to bed that Mrs. Tejprakash Kaur, 90 years old, still fully with it, living in Cincinnati, Ohio, was also a survivor. She lost her mother, she lost her 3 younger brothers, but her and her father survived, and she has a wonderful story of her father actually, well, he was drowning. That part was not nice, but he was able to swim. He saw a 6-year-old girl who was struggling for her life. He was able to help her for the next 2 days, hold on to a raft, and she was hungry. And he found a couple of onions floating. And because they had no idea how long they were going to be out at sea for, he was able to peel one part of the onion at a time and to feed this little girl. You know, I mean, how marvelous. These stories are only now starting to come out. So what a privilege it is for us. We're going to listen to some of the Tilawa family members who couldn't be here today. Let's start with Mrs. Kaur.
My name is Tejprakash Mangat, and I'm a survivor of the SS Tilawa tragedy. Every year at this time, I think of those that died, including my mother and 3 brothers. May they rest in peace. I'm sorry I cannot be with you all.
And I know the family are going to be watching this commemoration, and our thoughts are with you. apart from Mr. Jani, who you will not believe only lives 10 minutes from the house I lived in for 22 years, where I went to school and played cricket. I wish I had met Mr. Jani back then, but also nearby to Mr. Jani was Mr. Mervyn Massiel, who is 93 years old now, and he was living in Bombay during the time when this tragedy took place. Let's hear his story.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I can't be with you all on this great occasion, actually, when you're commemorating the 80th anniversary of the sinking of the ill-fated SS Tilawa. My name is Mervyn Massiel. I live in London. I am the second son of Mr. M.J. Massiel, who with his wife and 3 young children perished on this ill-fated boat in November 1942. I know many others also lost their lives. Some survived, which is good luck to them, but many perished. And unfortunately, their story has not been told. They've forgotten. That is totally wrong. We need to honor these fathers, mothers, sons and daughters, or granddaughters that perished in this tragedy. And I'm glad to see that so much is being done to keep their memory alive. And I hope you will hear a lot more this evening from the speakers. As I've recorded in my books, my brothers and I, we were very young when this tragedy occurred. I was, 11 or 12. My younger brother was 8. My elder brother was 13. So it was quite a blow to suddenly find that overnight we became orphans. You know, we had such a comfortable life, but my dad there in a good job and all that sort of thing. So much so we never believed anything would happen, so much so that we wrote to him. You know, that was our sort of normal way of doing things. Wrote to him in the hope of getting news back from him. And when, quite unlikely, when we never heard, something was within us telling us that something must have happened. And lo and behold, we got the news through a friend that the ship had been torpedoed, many lives lost, presumably even my parents' life, but we knew nothing about it till my uncle in Bombay, Mr. Sequeira, he and his son, who your son has met since in Canada, they went from hospital to hospital in Bombay because there were rumors going on that many people have been rescued and saved or in hospitals, and some even felt my dad or stepmother must be among them, so they went to every hospital. And as good luck would have it, they met my father's cabin boy. Sadly, I can't remember his name. I wish I knew. And he gave them first-hand knowledge, a first-hand story of what transpired. He said that he saw my dad on the upper deck with the 3-month-old step-sister of mine. When the first torpedo was fired, which was late at night, my father was on the upper deck with this little babe. He rushed down to the cabin to wake my stepmother and the 2 little children, Francis, 1-year-old, and Fina, 3 years old, I think. You can just imagine the commotion at that time, you know. So he comes up now with the stepmother and the little children. Oh, they must be in a hell of a state to be woken up at that hour of the night. And then he finds that all the boats, lifeboats, are occupied. And the cabin boy apparently said to him, "Why don't you jump?" And my dad's reaction was, "How can I jump with this young child and these 2 young and my wife?" So And I believe that was the last, because the cabin boy jumped, and after that apparently the second torpedo was fired when the ship went down. So I leave that to imagination. I just hate to think about it, what must have gone through their minds. And I feel it's very fortunate that we've got you and your son doing so much to perpetuate the memory of those who died or whose lives were taken away through this tragedy. And I think, although maybe the British government and even the Indian government have maybe forgotten all about this, I think it is time to resurrect the whole story and let the world know the truth. We need to tell the truth to the world, because you and I, we have lost loved ones, and lost them in very tragic circumstances. It was not as though they were going on a holiday. This was, they're going back to work, and it's sad. As I said, we were young to appreciate the full import of that, But now, in my older life, I can understand it, and I very often have not nightmares, but illusions of what they must have gone through. Not only my parents, but all the others who lost their lives, what they must have gone through. Screams, people screaming for help, but no one there to tell. It must have been awful. All I can say is that I feel that memory has to be kept alive, perpetuated, and brought to the world. We spent part of our holiday in Goa with my father before he left. And the last time I saw him was when they passed through Belgaum railway station en route to Bombay. And that's where the train stopped for quite some time. We were able to talk and sell us. So Dad said, look, I'll come back soon. In other words, he was going and hoping to retire and come back soon. So we were all really thrilled. My two brothers and I were very thrilled. So you can imagine just what our feelings were when we heard the bad news, the sadness, very sad. It has affected me, but even now my grandchildren, who never knew their great-grandfather, they still feel about it. They feel very much for it. I think, and maybe for them and generations future, the story needs to be told.
Absolutely.
I hope so.
Absolutely.
I'm very grateful to you and your son for taking so much of interest in this, It's a great thing.
Right.
Because otherwise this thing would have been just forgotten.
Yeah.
I got a text message from Mr. Masyal leading up to the program. He was anxious to watch it, and we are thinking of you, Mervyn. Thank you for sending that message to us. I mentioned earlier the three gentlemen who started the SS Tilawa Foundation in South Africa, and unfortunately they couldn't be here with us today, but it is absolutely appropriate that we give them the opportunity to share a few words. So I'd like Mr. Haroon Tal Mohammed from Pretoria, South Africa, to share a few words.
Good day to you. To all those attending and partaking in the 80th anniversary commemoration of the tragedy of the SS Tilawa being held in Mumbai. I take this opportunity to greet you with the universal greeting of peace. My name is Haroon Tal Mohammed, one of the founders of the SS Tilawa Foundation. This is the first time that such an event is being held to commemorate this tragic occurrence in world history. I, on behalf of my team, wish to congratulate the Solanki family and the Tilawa 1942 project for organizing such a well-coordinated and planned commemoration. So befitting to have this event at the very place where the victim's journey began and for those who survived to be brought back. We are so very touched and moved to have amongst us Mr. Arvindbhai Jani, one of the known survivors. As we speak, I have just received breaking news that another survivor, Ms. Taj Prakash Kaur, who is based in Ohio, USA, is alive, and she's 90 years old. Her daughter will try to give us the opportunity to talk to her, hopefully, within the next day or so. I have been involved in this project regarding this tragedy for the last 25 years and feel happy to know that some of our efforts have not been in vain. That at least we are able to bring the story to the fore and record it in world history. At least give recognition.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tar Mohammed. And we have one more from the president of the Darji Gujarati community in East London, who is the son of a survivor.
Hello, my name is Praveen Jivan, and I'm son of Lek Murar Jivan, who is one of the survivors on the incidents of SS Tilawa, which happened on 23rd of November 1942. At about midnight, on that night, fatal night, the ship was torpedoed and there was a chaos on the ship. My father didn't know how to swim, but he was worried that he's going to die. He wore a life jacket, and then he was roaming around on the decks to find out the appropriate escape route. There were so many boats, rescue boats, but it was meant for 50 people, and my father saw that more than 50 people were going on that boat, and they went straight into the water. They sunk straight into the water, so he avoided that. And in that fear, he was roaming around on the deck to see where he could go. And on the upper deck, he found where the cabins were. He found that people were shouting from inside the cabin. Unfortunately, they were locked in because the torpedo made have locked the doors. My father took a fire axe and started trying to open the door and banging with the fire axe. He managed to open 2 doors, but then he was panicking about himself. So he then came to the second deck, and he saw one of the crew member making ready a raft. And the raft had 1 tin of biscuits and 1 tin of water. And he pushed the raft into the sea. My father saw this opportunity and he jumped onto the sea. Luckily, he went straight down, but when he came up, he saw the raft about his hand away. So with much difficulty, he climbed onto the raft, and then he was alone on the raft. So then he saw these people who were swimming and shouting and with the fear. So he picked them one by one, and he rescued them he put them onto the raft. And then he saw one lady who was hanging onto the rope, and he rescued her as well and pulled her into the raft. In total, he rescued about 20 people onto the raft. And then as they moved on about 400 yards away from the ship, the second torpedo hit SS Tilawa, and the ship slowly sunk into the waters. It was pitch dark, no one to talk to, and there was a fear among all those 20 people, and the raft started drifting. And there were waves which were much higher, and they were going over his head. and they were just quiet and praying for their survival. So 2 days and 2 nights they were in the raft. Nobody said anything, nobody ate anything. And this, on the third morning, they saw something which was flying onto the sky. They thought that the shore was near. But it wasn't a bird, it was a rescue plane which signaled a rescue ship called SS Birmingham, and they came to pick them up. All the 20 passengers, all the 20 people, their legs were frozen, they couldn't get up. So they were lifted into the ship, into the hot tub, and a tot of brandy. At that time, my elder sister was 3 months old, and my mother was in a town called Navsari. Eventually, my father telephoned relatives that he is safe, because they all thought he would have died into the disaster. This story was told by my father so many times. Every time somebody came to our house and visit us, he used to tell a story with fear, with anger, and with excitement. For us, he was a brave man to rescue 20 people on the raft. And nobody has actually said why the ship was torpedoed, although now it's come out about. It's very nice for Emile to organize this event at Mumbai, and I wish I can join him there. I wish him luck, and I wish to pay respect to all the people who lost their life.
Thank you, Mr. Jivan. We know you're watching. So, in summary, where do we go from here? There are many questions that families connected to Tilawa have. Some are, did the Japanese know that cargo liner? Why was Tilawa authorized to be a ship that would carry passengers? Was there anything more that could have been done to save lives? Could this tragedy have been forgotten, etc.? And we've listed these questions on our website too. But now, as we get greater awareness and we get access to further research, we hope that we can answer more of these questions. So, in the coming days and months and years, we hope that one, it will be easier for us to get access to some classified documentation. We hope that perhaps maritime museums will open up a little space for the Tilawa tragedy, and maybe even a documentary and a movie can be made of the Indian people during the Second World War who lost their lives or survived from the tragedy. And hopefully, with all of these efforts, eventually over time, it will no longer be a forgotten tragedy.